So, looking at my last video, it was a very interesting talk about what could have been our next Joestar had the universe never resetted, if you wanted to go with one of my other ideas. So, let's go with a more unique idea. Let's talk about the idea of JoJo villains like potential JoJo villains for each part. Like, what would Steel Ball Run, JoJolian, and JoJo Lands be like with the new villain in the original timeline? And also replacing the main characters as well. We also gotta replace the main villains. I could do a JoBro version one day, probably not though. But today we're gonna talk about potential ideas for some great main villains. There aren't many ideas here, but a lot of the ideas here are pretty cool. So yeah, let's talk about what could have been our next JoJo main villain had the universe never resetted. But before I start the video, I'm gonna add one rule. I will not be using custom main villains, so I'm not going to make one up on the spot for the story. This is going to be, for the sake of argument, a main villain potentially returning for a part. Kind of like how Dio did in Stardust Crusaders. So let's talk about the potential main villain ideas that could have worked for, like, returns. And we're not talking about new ones. That's going to be the only rule here. So the first return I want to talk about is the potential return of Dio. Now, let's be honest, I don't think none of us want to see Dio come back. And I know you guys are going to talk about how it's impossible for Dio to come back. But however, there is one thing that actually does make it possible. The Green Baby. Now, if you don't remember, the Green Baby turned into Sea Moon because Poochie got inhaled with Joestar blood or something. But what was kind of hinted out was that the Green Baby came from Dio. Like, when I mean that, I mean more the fact that it was technically from Dio's bone. It got birthed from a tree and then Poochie absorbed it. So maybe somehow, maybe one of Dio's former minions find a way to create another Green Baby, which then brings Dio back to life. So in other words, I'm kind of saying this. Why not have a Poochie-like follower, or heck, if you want some little nostalgia, why not bring back a former Part 3 villain, and maybe somehow they know about the Heaven Plan, and they know about Green Babies, and bada bing bada boom, Dio's brought back. This could actually work and be a pretty cool idea, but I do have a con with it. We don't need Dio back. Like, in my honest opinion, I don't think there's no real reason to bring Dio back, save for, like, fan service. But, like, realistically, I don't really think he should be brought back. Heck, I don't really want to see him kind of come back, as I think 6 would be a good conclusion to the Dio stuff. But if I am being honest with one thing, I do like the idea of a Part 3 villain coming back, or let alone another main antagonist from, like, the parts that were not super main come back. Like, as long as they have a very busted stand, that would work as a good main antagonist opponent. So overall, I don't really want to see Dio come back as the main villain. I think his time in the spotlight's done. Now, the next potential villain idea would be bringing back Cars. Or heck, another idea could be bringing back Santana, or bringing back the Pillarman for all that matters. Now, to be honest, I do really think we could have seen more of the Stone Mask, like, after 2. Which I kind of get why we don't, like, stands are now the new cool thing. Homon and vampires are just thrown out of the window. But I actually do believe they could bring the Stone Mask back while making stands a big kind of focus to it. And also the Red Stone could maybe make some kind of return. Maybe Joseph playing a similar role to Lisa. Something like that. And not only that, but I think we're bound to at least get an Ultimate Life Form if we combine the Mask and the Stone, which could actually be really cool. Like, for example, I would like to see maybe some more Pillarmen, like an entire herd of Ultimate Life Forms could be kind of funny. Maybe Santana as the Ultimate Life Form could have actually been really cool. Because those ideas all kind of seem like they could work. And let alone the idea of Cars getting a stand is also pretty cool as well. And kind of, that's my overall kind of conclusion on it. I do believe there's a lot of ideas you could do with it. And I do believe this one would be better than the Dio idea. Because we don't really get much closure to... I mean, Cars got good closure, I'll admit that. But Santana kind of got lackluster, if I'm being honest. So it'd be cool if Santana got at least one last time to shine, and maybe you can bring Cars back at the end. Maybe something like Santana carries the plot, and then they go to the end and Cars gets brought back, and the team has to fight Cars to see the true boss battle at the end. Something cool like that could work. And overall, I think that's my idea on it. I don't think they should bring Cars back immediately and kind of hype it up for a little bit before he fully comes back. Now, the next potential main villain idea, and I think this idea is the most interesting one, and that's bringing Giorno back as the villain. Now, as for reasons why, well, for starters, GER kind of has a time manipulation ability, a trend seen in other main villain stands, which actually could be a really cool idea. The entire reset to zero being a main villain power instead could lead to some interesting conflicts between the group. And as for his morals, I do believe Giorno would probably be one of those villains that's like, he believes he's doing right for the world, but in all actuality, he's not doing good. Like, maybe because he's like the boss of Passione and all that, he could realistically use that as a way to kind of get what he wants and not only take over Italy, but the entire world, but believing he could save it. So that could kind of be a motivation for Giorno. In a way, it kind of makes three kind of ideas up. Like, for example, maybe kind of similar to how Light worked from Death Note, while at the same time kind of making him come out to be like Diavolo, the man he hated. Another interesting idea is an evil version of Jonathan, because technically Giorno was a good guy version of Dio, like that what if Dio was a good guy kind of thing, and now he's now he's an evil version of Jonathan, which is a very unique idea that honestly has a lot of ideas that could go off with it. And overall, I do believe Giorno actually has potential to be a great main villain. Personally, I think he'd be a better mentor figure in my opinion, but him being a main antagonist could be pretty cool as well. Let alone if you want to go with the idea of Giorno having kids. Maybe Giorno's kids versus Giorno could be a very unique kind of stand battle. And that's kind of my overall thoughts, with its only complaint being that GR is just too busted. But however, I do believe you could find a way to rewrite around it. But that's my overall take on that idea. Now the next idea for a potential main villain would be Shizuka. Now this one's kind of odd, and you may just be judging me and like saying, wait, why Shizuka as a main villain? Well, to that, I do have an interesting idea for a main villain storyline. So maybe because her family life, she becomes a spoiled brat, which realistically would make sense for her to be kind of a spoiled brat. Kind of gets whatever she wants because of her family. Joseph's like rich and all that. And this kind of leads her to a point wanting to be a Joestar to go on a bizarre adventure, being the first female one. But before she could get that chance, Jolene, quote-unquote, steals it from her, and that could kind of cause her to want to go after Jolene, and it would kind of fit the character of Jolene to kind of go through something similar to her dad. Like, even after her big adventure, she still can't catch a break from the enemies, and it would kind of fit. And plus, with how Joseph and Susie were, they were super old when they got Shizuka, so at that point, it seems likely that Shizuka more than likely could have been a spoiled brat, because she has two people who are more of grandparents than parents, so they're not going to take care of her, basically care about her, they're just going to give her whatever she wants, because they saved her, so in return, she just gets whatever she wants whenever she wants. Which could honestly be a very interesting story. And on a side note, if you want to make Shizuka downright unlikable as a main antagonist, maybe have her kill Joseph. Kind of give closure to Joseph's character by having Shizuka downright kill him. Like, I don't hate Joseph or anything, I actually love him, it's just, it would be a very unique idea to have Shizuka kill Joseph to make her more unlikable. And have her basically inherit the Joestar money, maybe for the sake of the story Holly dies from old age because she's pretty old. And maybe for the sake of the story Josuke probably doesn't inherit any money. Either that, or maybe he just dies in part 6 in some of my storylines. So Shizuka's the only one who gets money because something could cause that to only go to her. She would end up hiring assassins to go after Jolene and her kid, or maybe any other Joestar and their kid. I just think Jolene works the best in this scenario. And that could kind of be the storyline with Shizuka, where she's kind of going after Jolene because she's jealous that she stole her spotlight. And when I mean stole, I mean quote-unquote stole. So that would kind of be her story. Now, my only real issue with this is that Shizuka's stand Aquatic Baby kind of sucks. Like, it's not a useless ability, but, like, for a main villain, it would suck. But my only real thing you could do is maybe she gets Requiem and boosted up in some way, or maybe something else can cause her to boost up her stand. Maybe there's some kind of stand power she gets that maybe boost up her ability in some way. There's never really... I have no real clue to say on this one. Hard to say when it comes to it, that whether or not Shizuka would actually awaken some kind of superpower ability that can make her a menacing threat. Or you could kind of go with the route of making Shizuka someone who's a coward but is very intelligent. She never gets into any fights, and when she does get into a fight, she gets downright obliterated. Similar to how Kira was in Diamond is Unbreakable. Someone who's very intelligent but sucks in combat. So overall, that's my idea if Shizuka were to be a main villain, and I do believe this idea could work. Personally, I think her being a protagonist could tell a better story, as her kind of being an adopted Joestar. An adopted member of the Joestar family on an adventure could tell a great story. Having her being adopted would just kind of be another Dio situation where they just took in another terrible child, and that would probably be the only thing to happen out of that. Now, Shizuka was actually supposed to be my last idea for it, but I thought of something cooler, and that's making Mikitaka the main villain. Now, as for why, and you're gonna be like, oh, why some joke sidekick as the mentor, like the main villain kind of thing? Well, I have two words that could maybe sell the idea. Alien invasion. Now, before you people go off and say, oh, alien invasion trope's been done to death. Well, so is the Mafia trope, and so is the Prison Break trope, and yet Part 5 and 6 are beloved. Listen, I'm just saying, you don't need to make Mikitaka the main villain. Just make him a traitor of some sort. Maybe the whole time he was only using Earth as a way, he was like sent as a spy from the aliens to kind of get intel on Earth so he can invade it in the coming years. This can maybe happen after 6, like a few months, few years after 6, give or take, where Mikitaka finally puts his plan into action, calls in his friends, and they decide to invade Earth together. Is it a possible idea? I mean, yeah, it's possible. Like, in a world like JoJo, realistically, aliens could exist. I wouldn't say it's impossible, and I do believe it could fit the story of kind of bringing in the alien invasion angle. And plus, Araki's never really done the trope of science fiction in JoJo. I think the closest we've gotten to a science fiction part was probably 6, but still not really too science fiction-y. So I think a part like that, where Mikitaka's the villain and it's more sci-fi, could realistically work. Like, it would be hard to go with, as Mikitaka was kind of a comic relief during Part 4, but then having him to come in and, like, he becomes this more menacing threat. While it's hard for it to work out, I do believe Araki would be able to try the idea out. In execution, the idea could realistically work. And heck, if you think it'd be cool, maybe a Thus Spoke series like that could be cool. Like Thus Spoke Rohan fights Mikitaka and the aliens. And that could actually be a really cool idea. I do think that Mikitaka could have gotten closure to his character, because he never really did. So maybe having him come into Earth only as a traitor of some sort to kind of try to invade Earth in some way with his alien pals could actually be a really cool storyline. Kind of going with the idea of like the alien invasion stuff. You know how all those movies go where aliens come to Earth and invade the world or whatever? That idea could actually work here in JoJo. JoJo is a crazy series, so no one's going to really question the idea of aliens existing. And I do believe alien stand users could be a very fun idea. And let alone, maybe a part themed in space could actually be really cool. And actually could realistically work. The more I think about it, it actually sounds like a fun idea. So, like, my overall thoughts on this, I think this could actually be a cool part. Like, Mikitaka, like, the more I think about it, I was like, that part might suck. But then the more I'm, like, talking about it and thinking about it, the more it's like, well, it could work, and if it works, it could easily, without a doubt, overthrow Steel Ballroom as the best part. If Steel Ballroom never existed, this could be the fan favorite part. A part based on fighting aliens could be downright fun, downright cuckoo, crazy, every word you can think of. It would just be probably one of the funnest parts in JoJo, for being honest. A part where aliens invade JoJo could be really cool, and under the right execution, which I think Araki has, this could without a doubt be one of the best JoJo parts. So overall, I was going to say Giorno was my favorite idea for a main villain. Same with Cars, but I think Mikitaka is my favorite idea for a main villain. The idea just seems super cool, and on paper and on execution, this idea is something that would really work. Now, my least favorite idea, probably the Dio one, because I don't really think there's any reason to bring Dio back in the story. So overall, that's the video. There's not as much compared to the last, but to be honest, I couldn't really think of ideas. I mean, a lot of people like to bring up the idea of Jotaro being a main villain. Personally, I just don't think it fits his character to be a villain. Even if you try to give him the Light Yagami motivation, it wouldn't work. And you can make up a main villain, which is what I would recommend doing if you don't want to do a callback main villain. That's kind of all I can think of, I guess. Hope you enjoyed the video. It was very fun to make and a lot more crazier compared to my last. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!